everybody. We're meeting today with Jordy. They are from Waterdrop LA. Jordy, if you want to introduce yourself, give us a little description on Waterdrop LA, who you guys are and what you do.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me. I'm Jordy. I go by he, him. My day job is I'm a researcher, but at Waterdrop LA, I'm one of our team members. So that means I'm assisting with logistics, for a given distribution, some back-end stuff, grant writing, kind of all over the place.
How did Waterdrop LA get started in the community work that they're doing in Skid Row?
Waterdrop, when it was first formed, was formed by five folks who basically started by, I believe, either making sandwiches or burritos and then bringing them to downtown, specifically kind of around City Hall. And in the very early days of what they were doing, I don't think there was any intention of it becoming like a big nonprofit organization. It was really like, we would like to do something with the resources we have. Quickly, they realized that, they were being asked for water quite a lot. It turned out that water was a much greater need, that there were other organizations providing food, or that folks just needed water. It sort of pivoted at a certain point to start bringing in water, initially around City Hall, and then expanded into Skid Row. This all was all happening in 2020, so there was a huge outpouring of support for the work that folks were doing. I think it started kind of as fundraising on social media, not actually as necessarily intending to fundraise a ton of money, but around that time, they got a lot of money and then started really like grassroots donations, and then decided that they were going to try to make this a recurring thing, providing water to all of Skid Row as well as the downtown areas that it initially started in. And since then, it's sort of grown into a full operation where we're doing this every single week, and we haven't missed a week in, I don't know, more than 230.
I think it was 230. I think tomorrow's 236.
Okay, exactly. So we haven't missed a week that whole time. We've been providing more water to more folks.
What brought you to Waterdrop LA? There's so many orgs out there. There's so many people trying to help Skid Row. What made you decide to go to Waterdrop LA specifically?
I think I started coming in 2021, and initially my partner was the one who was like, let's go do something. She went by herself, then was like, come with me this week. It's a really good time is the wrong word, because but it also is also a good time. Like, you're with community members and you're really getting to know people. So it wasn't necessarily that I was choosing between organizations or anything like that. It was more that this seemed like something that was important. So I started showing up kind of quickly. The team was like, we always need back-end support. We need help with X, Y, and Z. I think there was an interest in having some folks do a little bit more policy advocacy work. So I started getting involved in that way. I really wanted to learn more about what our water access looked like, and what we could do to kind of alleviate some of the burdens that folks face while trying to get more people involved in that.
I've gone twice now. I will say it is that feeling of this is a really great time, but it's not a good time, in the sense that you are meeting so many people who are rolling up their sleeves, getting it done, doing the work. There's nobody complaining. Everyone is just, we're here to get a job done and we're all ready to do it. And it's very community oriented. And then all of those same people go down to Skid Row with the utmost respect for that community, with so much care for the work that they're doing. And it's organized, and I feel like it's really effective. And I think that sometimes you don't see that in these types of orgs. And I appreciated so much how I show up and there's COVID testing, explanations on how to do the Narcan, not sending you out there without knowledge. They're really sending you out there ready to go. It does make it feel like a good time, because you really feel surrounded not just by like-minded people, but by people who really know what they're doing and what their community needs. How did you guys facilitate building that trust with the community on Skid Row?
It's heartening that you say that, because I think it's been a lot of work. Really, in the last year, we've kind of streamlined the way we do things at Waterdrop, built out some procedures that we didn't have before. We've got a kind of bigger team involved now than we used to, which means we can do quite a lot more to support volunteers. We've kind of built out the roles that we have as team members. Back when I was first starting with Waterdrop, the expectation was that we needed 2 team members. And with 2 team members, we could run a drop. It's essentially somebody checking people in, somebody unloading water, and then those folks to be at our kind of location within Skid Row while the volunteers are out doing their distribution. Now we need a minimum of 4, 5, 6, sometimes we'll have 10 team members at a drop. And that's, I think, made a lot of it better. From things like, just directing you where to park while you're loading your car.
Yeah.
To, as you said, ensuring that we have COVID testing, making sure that we have enough people explaining what we'd like you to be doing. Homelessness is a really normalized thing, I think, in the United States. Skid Row is a place that obviously has the highest concentration of homelessness potentially in the United States, also in Los Angeles for sure. When you're going to do a distribution, folks are in poverty, and folks are in, kind of needing a lot and might be in kind of crisis circumstances, right? So there's simultaneously that, observing that and seeing other human beings in a crisis setting, mixed with the fact that there's a lot of community building that happens both with, among volunteers in the team, but also with folks in Skid Row, right? Like, so a huge part of at least what we try to do is center the needs, as you said, of folks in Skid Row, but also build community, right? Like a huge tenet of mutual aid is that, people are your neighbors. They're not just a service population or something
Yeah.
like that. They're human beings that have needs and wants and desires, and they can be friends. You don't have to be friends with everybody, but you can make relationships. And that relationship building is something that we really value. Basically organize a big water distribution every single week. What we do is we pass out 2 gallons of water per person that we encounter when we're in Skid Row. We have divided Skid Row up into a number of different routes that volunteers drive along and park and pass out water. Like I said, we've been doing that for a long time, and we're trying to center community needs. So we also provide some other resources. All volunteers have Narcan on their person. Narcan, for anybody who doesn't know, is something that reverses opioid overdoses. We try to have, obviously we can't fit every single size, but we try to have clothes. At certain times of the year, depending on weather, we'll try to make sure that there's tarps in cars for folks to provide to folks living in Skid Row. We used to have a lot more tents. That's not really something we have as much of anymore. Certain routes that volunteers are driving also get food, particularly on the outskirts of Skid Row, which are further from kind of central food distributions within Skid Row.
They are our neighbors. Like, this is someone's brother, father, mother, aunt, cousin, best friend from high school. Like, these are people who we grow up with. Getting them to not just trust that, like, hey, we're here to help you, but also we see you as a person. How did you guys grow that trust with the community?
I think the biggest thing there is that we try to consistently and reliably show up. Since we've now been doing this for more than 4 years, folks have come to expect us, and folks have come to know, oh, the water folks come by. And if I'm not there, they'll leave some water by my tent or wherever I'm staying. That's particularly important because a lot of folks have been let down by systems, right? A lot of folks have been promised things. They've been told, like, oh yeah, I'm going to help you with this. We don't want to be another kind of group of people letting more people down. So what that means is we generally don't promise things that we can't provide. Like, we're not promising to bring a tent. We're not promising to bring, I can't promise to get you inside. I can't do any of that, but I can bring water every single week. I can be a familiar face over a long period of time. Maybe we can get to know each other. But one thing that's consistent is that we're bringing water every week. And even if it's not the same volunteer, you know that somebody's going to come.
While I was on my routes, they don't know me, but they knew where I was coming from. The minute I said, I'll walk at these free water, they're talking to me about, oh, I've been waiting for you guys. I knew you were coming. I'm so happy to see you. It really is like showing them through your actions. Like, we're showing up, rain or shine. We're going to be here to take care of you guys, make sure you have water. And I think that that's like really important to the foundation of your organization. What are one of your like main struggles, do you feel like? Is it getting volunteers to show up? Is it getting donations? Like, what is making it hard to get these water drops to happen?
In these last couple of months, we've had a huge outpouring of volunteer support and also an outpouring of donations. So both money and in-kind goods, those have been super helpful. Water Drop has historically been a largely kind of grassroots funded organization. We don't get a huge number of grants. Our COVID program that we're operating with testing and stuff like that actually did come from a grant, but we still get a ton of grassroots donations. And that, I would say, is like what funds most of what we do.
Yeah. And I will say that at least with the COVID testing, how I felt about that is, regardless if it's COVID or not, wearing masks is so important because there are people who don't have access to healthcare, which is already so limited in the United States, regardless of your housing status. So you need to have that awareness of, like, I don't want to be making these people sick with whatever I've got going on that I'm not treating and bringing that in. So I think being able to not just provide COVID tests, but provide masks, and not just for the unhoused, but also for your volunteers, is like such an incredible service that I don't think people take as seriously as they should.
The other reason that we do masking too, we at Waterdrop take COVID really seriously, and also other illnesses, right, is also because we want to make sure that volunteers feel safe volunteering with us. We want to make sure that, like, if you're immunocompromised and you can only come if you're around other folks who are also practicing COVID safety, Waterdrop is a place you can come, because we're all going to be wearing masks. And not only are we not hopefully spreading things to folks in Skid Row, which is, as you mentioned, incredibly important with the vulnerable population, also our volunteers, so that you could come to Waterdrop and feel like other folks are taking their health seriously.
Do you find that there's other concerns, whether it's immigration? I know we've been handing out flyers, whether it's the police, whether it's, volunteers having stereotypes of the community that they're walking into. What is like the most, I guess, difficult negative thing that people are bringing, and how do you guys manage that? How do you manage expectations and make people feel comfortable with what they're doing?
I think we try to ensure that we kind of state our values when we're briefing folks. There's a lot of stigma around homelessness, and there's a lot of misconceptions around homelessness that I think are pervasive even among very well-intentioned people. I mean, we generally hope that when folks come in, they're doing their best to combat those things. We try to model those kinds of things. Like, you don't hear folks making really bad jokes at water drop. The other thing is we do always pair new volunteers with experienced volunteers. So hopefully that experienced volunteer is kind of showing them the ropes and kind of modeling again, what we expect around,
Yes.
treatment of people fairly.
I know that we have a lot of fears with the current administration and with a lot of changes in fundraising and how organizations are being managed and how this is going to affect our communities. Is there something that you can point to? Obviously, you're giving hundreds of people water every week, but is there something that you can point to that you can be like, I know that I facilitated this. I made this amazing thing happen. If I had not been here, this wouldn't have happened, and you guys can do it too.
I think the fact that we've been able to go on for so long, right?
Yeah.
It takes a lot of work as a team. Our team's putting in a ton of hours on the back end. The overall project of water drop is something that I'm really proud of continuing. I think a lot of organizations, they go through cycles of folks coming in and out of the organization, and then they peter out. And I think I'm really proud that water drop has been able to continue providing resources, with the asterisk that our goal is to not exist one day because water is not an issue. But while water is an issue, I'm really proud that we've been able to continue to do that. And that's meant so many hours by people on the back end, ironing out community agreements, ironing out route changes, discussing where to source things kind of ethically to the extent that that's possible, dealing with crises on a weekend related to our water order or not having the trucks that we need. There's a whole lot of work that goes in on the back end, and I'm really proud that we've been able to continue to do that. And then as far as impact, I don't recall the numbers off the top of my head, but I think we give out on your average week 2,200 gallons of water to roughly 1,300 people. It depends on a weekly basis, right? Because the community's in flux. If we didn't have the folks we did, it wouldn't have happened. If we think about water specifically, right? Water access is the thing that Water Drop is out there trying to combat to the extent that we can. Like homelessness, when we think about the solutions, really the solution there is affordable housing. One of the things kind of around myth busting that's a little bit difficult is sometimes when you do myth busting, you kind of separate deserving populations and undeserving populations. I could say oh, well, actually the majority of folks experiencing homelessness don't have a substance use issue. And that is true, but that doesn't mean that those folks, if the majority did, therefore they would not be deserving of XYZ, housing, healthcare, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
When we were growing up, my mom raised us as a single mom. She was from another country. We're from another country. And in her mind, it was very much I did it. Why can't you? And as I was growing up, that was my mind too. I was not a very empathetic person. When I got older, I realized well, there are certain privileges my mom had that somebody else might not. She already spoke English. She already had her papers taken care of. She's a citizen. Her first job, though it was minimum wage, somebody recommended her and helped her get in. And though everything that she has, she did on her own. So when she hears me say well, Mom, you had certain privileges, she kind of takes that to heart. Well, are you saying I didn't work for what I have? I've worked so hard. And that is not the case. I saw my mom's struggles. I saw how hard it was trying to get us out of the poverty we were in. Whether you're able to work hard or not, if you're able-bodied, if you are educated, these things give you a leg up that other people don't have, and there is a lack of equity. And when one emergency happens, whether it's you've missed one payment of rent, you've got sick for 3 months and you couldn't work, now you have no job, these things start to stack up in an environment where it is really very difficult to get any kind of help from the government. And then we're well, if you're on drugs, you shouldn't get help. If you have mental health issues, you shouldn't get help. If you're an alcoholic, you shouldn't get help. But why? These people are already at the bottom of what life has to offer. They still need water. They still need housing. You still need water. You still need housing. How do we get people away from this meritocracy mindset to understand that, like, if we all have our needs met, then maybe we will have a society where we do have less unhoused people. Wouldn't it be better to have people in a home?
Yeah, for sure. So first of all, thanks for sharing your experience. I mean, like that's makes a ton of sense, and it sounds like your mom did work really hard and went through quite a lot. And I think that's the experience of a lot of folks, right? That like, working really, really hard in a country and then reaping some of the benefits. I feel like it's a very common reaction then to have folks say like, oh well, I did it, why can't you, kind of a thing. And that's, I think, comes from a totally valid place. Like it comes from a place of needing to work to survive and needing to do what you can. And I can't necessarily speak to that as somebody with immense privilege. One of the things that like I often think of is I hope that other folks don't have to go through a
Yes.
lot of the struggles, right? Like you hope that it would be easier for other folks. And then I think also another piece, especially about homelessness, is housing scarcity is a problem. There need to be more affordable housing units for folks. Cities with the highest, with the lowest vacancy rates and the highest like rent to income ratios, basically kind of least affordability, are the cities that have the highest homeless counts. Working hard doesn't necessarily, get you what you need. And then there's also a lot of barriers that folks face. They could be things like, mental health related, they could be drug use related, they could be criminal background related.
It could be a language
There could
barrier. Maybe you just
be
don't
a
speak
language
English.
barrier. Yeah, there's like a zillion things that can get in the way for
Yeah.
folks. A lot of folks are essentially, I mean, you hear this all the time, one paycheck away from experiencing homelessness. That's a precarious place that I don't want people to be in, much less much less on the street.
In an ideal world, how do you think we could solve the water crisis? At least in Los Angeles, in California. I know that France has like public access to water. Anyone can walk around. There's fountains and there's like maps of where all the fountains are. What kind of studies or research that you guys have done as an org do you think could be California's future in a few years?
The solution here is quality housing, right? And the reason I say quality is because we have folks who come down from SROs. SROs are essentially like hotels that have been converted into housing, long-term housing for folks. They're not the highest quality, oftentimes not super well maintained, but they are very cheap housing. We have folks come down from SROs and ask for water because they don't either trust their water or their water's been
Yeah.
off for several days or things like that. So quality housing is the solution, right? That is like, how do I get water? I go to my shower and I go to my faucet, right? And that's what I would hope everybody can do. That's the solution. Second to that, I mean, as you mentioned, we could think about a lot more water access points. Even as somebody who's housed, I would love it if there was a drinking fountain on my corner, right?
Yeah.
I would love it if there was a bathroom on my corner. I would love it if I was on the metro and there were bathrooms and drinking fountains. Increasing the amount of these water access points, or WASH is the term, or water, sanitation, and hygiene, those would be fantastic. And then for a place like Skid Row, which has a really high concentration of homeless folks, there's a resource called the Skid Row Refresh Spot in Skid Row, which it has showers, it has bathrooms, it has a place where you can fill up a jug of water. They also actually have phone charging and a bunch of other resources there, and they have laundry services. So there's another huge water use. That is a really important resource in Skid Row that other communities don't have, but it's still not enough for Skid Row. Like there was a report
Yeah.
a little while back, I think No Place to Go is what it's called, where they argued that there should be something like 5 or 6 Skid Row refresh spots so that you could meet international standards for like water access, sanitation, and hygiene, especially in places that have relatively high concentrations of homelessness. That would be a huge resource for people.
Outside of the homeless, access to water, hygiene, sanitation, I have a very long commute. And so I know that I have friends probably in the chat who could tell you my main complaint is I am driving home and I have to use the bathroom. And like, where am I going to go to the bathroom? If you go to McDonald's, Starbucks, any Subway, they're going to expect you to either buy something or you need to ask for a passcode. Locked up because we don't want homeless people in the bathroom. What people don't realize is this is not just an issue for the unhoused. You also don't have access to water and bathrooms easily because we've stigmatized the unhoused so much and their needs. It's almost like pregnant people, disabled people, regular people need to use the bathroom, regular people need water, regardless of their housing status. And because we've locked it up as a privilege, and only certain people are allowed to have this access, it affects all of us.
And then when it comes to other kinds of resources, right, there's the Refresh Spot, which is a fantastic model like for providing a large amount of resources all in one place. But there's also more decentralized things. Like in Skid Row, they have I think, 5 bathrooms in the public right of way, in addition to porta potties and things like that that are not super well maintained. But the 5 bathrooms basically on the street, those are accessible to folks. Those are the kinds of things that could be put in all sorts of
Yeah.
other places. There are drinking fountains in Skid Row. There's 9 total. One of those has been broken since 2020. The other 8, 2 of them are located in parks. So that means they're not accessible at night, which means there's 6 essentially drinking fountains in Skid Row. Those 6 are just used so much for all sorts of things that they're broken all the time. Skid Row, I would want there to be like a drinking fountain on every street corner. Other parts of Los Angeles, I would hope there would just be more drinking fountains and bathrooms around for folks to access what they need.
All right, so Peacefire now mentioned whenever there's a catastrophe, almost instantly we see disaster capitalism taking place. We saw this with predatory renters jacking up prices during the fires. What other examples have you seen on the ground?
I don't know that we have seen at Waterdrop specifically like any sort of predatory practices. What we have certainly seen is like that kind of scarcity that happens right after an emergency or even right before an emergency. In a typical week where we provide 8 pallets of water, on like expanded weeks we provide 9, and actually more recently we've been providing 9 or 10. That's a lot of water to purchase. Some of that water comes donated, but that's a pretty recent thing. After the fires, when everybody was purchasing water, like we had put in water orders and those water orders dried up, right?
Yeah.
They didn't have water for us. So I don't know that I've seen the kind of price gouges from individuals and the government related to disasters. What we have seen is the the scarcity kicks in. Actually, in some ways, at least in the immediate aftermath of a disaster, we actually see quite a lot of support. It's a great thing that people are coming together, but it's also kind of a strange thing that it takes a big disaster to make folks come together. And then one thing that I'm really kind of always anxious about is how long is it going to last, and will it be lasting?
Something else that another chatter brought up, so Fabuli mentioned public water access infrastructure is something that doesn't get talked about or implemented enough. Having quality housing for more limited access, also super important. Thanks for mentioning both of these. There's apps that were developed for people who have Crohn's disease that provide maps for public bathroom facilities, and we need more of that info. And I completely agree. I think that if we had these systems in place, like if refresh corners were consistently placed throughout the city, we could have directories and maps the way you do at a mall for what store you want to go to, of like, hey LA, this is where you need to go if you need to take a shower, if you need to go to the bathroom, if you're thirsty. This is where you can go, and it's maintained and it's quality and it's for the community.
There actually are a few resources out there. Like WeTap is one of them. I want to say there's like Find Help. That's another one. I don't know if Find Help maps drinking fountains or bathrooms, but I know WeTap definitely they focus on bathrooms. And actually at Waterdrop we've been doing a little bit of like trying to collect data on bathrooms and water access points outside of Skid Row. And like San Francisco actually has, like their city puts out a or maybe it's the county, I guess city and county are the same there. They put out a map that shows where all the drinking fountains are and all the bathrooms are. I think in LA, one of the big things is there's just not enough of them.
Yeah.
Right? So even if, I would guess most folks in Skid Row know where they could go to the bathroom if they needed to, and they know where they could get whatever resources they need to. Because word gets around and folks help each other out. When I think about outside of Skid Row, where I have a lot less experience, huge caveat there, I wouldn't necessarily know, my nearest bathroom is outside of maybe a park, but not all parks have bathrooms. Parks are locked. Or, they close after a certain point. You can get in trouble for being there. Probably certain people get in trouble more based on the way that they look.
There's a couple other questions. Let me see. What could Californians do to reclaim water owned by billionaires like the Resnicks who produce pistachios, which require tons of water? If there's water scarcity, shouldn't certain crops be banned?
Yes, there is a water scarcity issue from we should not be using water for these other things. We should be using water for these things. I think in LA, at least from my perspective, it's sort of similar to like food. It's not that not enough food is being produced, it's that there's a food distribution problem, right? It's not that there's not enough water for LA or for unhoused folks in LA specifically, right? We can talk about LA, whether or not LA has enough water, period. But at least as it currently stands, it's not that there's not enough water in LA, it's that it's not being distributed to folks experiencing homelessness.
You just have one thing you want to at least plug to chat or help motivate people who, I know some of you are not in California, so you can't come to Waterdrop LA, but motivate people to, what can you do for your community to help improve water access, to help get people off the internet and outside touching grass, helping their community with meeting their different needs.
One of the most basic things that one can do is go out and talk to folks who are experiencing homelessness. You can go and ask, like, hey, is there anything you need? Like, I'm going to the store right now. You can have some money on hand if somebody asks you for money. Check in on your neighbors, make sure they're doing okay. As far as like kind of volunteer type stuff, I would guess that virtually every single city, no matter where you are, has some kind of mutual aid or mutual aid adjacent organization that you can tap into. I'm hesitant to say go start a water drop because I think really that depends what people need. It might be that people don't need water drops, they need food drops. It'll depend on the community. But that starts with going out and seeing what people might need. You can also donate to organizations all over the US. There are orgs that are super small, there are orgs that are big, that are all doing direct needs work for folks and also doing like advocacy and other things. So you can donate your money. You can, oftentimes folks will have, or organizations will have wish lists of physical goods if you'd rather do that, though I think money's generally more appreciated.
If there's any other questions or anything else you guys want specifically from Jordy regarding Water Drop LA, water access, the unhoused communities, access to water, and your way to participate, I'll give you guys like a few more seconds to ask those questions. And then Jordy, if you just want to plug Water Drop one more time and just let everybody know who you are, what it is you do. But this has been really great. I'm so grateful for your time. Thank you so much for being here with me today.
Yeah, of course. Water Drop LA is a mutual aid organization, a 501c3 nonprofit as well, that provides water to unhoused residents in Skid Row. We also actually do a few other programs that I didn't really talk about, but the biggest one is that we provide water on a weekly basis to residents in Skid Row. You can find more information about how to volunteer or donate at waterdropla.org. You can also find us on Instagram, waterdropla.
Thank you so much, Jordy. It looks like there's no other questions. Everyone is just saying keep up the great work. Hope you get more volunteers. Thank you so much for being here and for all that you do. If you ever want to come back and chat about other things that you guys are working on or any new exciting things happening for the organization, you're always more than welcome. I'll see you at the next Water Drop.
Sounds good. Thanks so much, Caro.
Thank you. See you later. All right, bye. I hope that, whatever you're able to do in your communities, this kind of like spurs some, not just hope, but some motivation to like go out there. I know like these conversations are important and I love having them. And I love participating like in the panels that we do on here and all the discussion we do. But sometimes, guys, we need to touch grass and we need to just go help our neighbors and be like, what's up? What do you need? He mentioned like this is one of the biggest years that they've had. The last 2 years have been really big and they've gotten more people than they ever used to. The goal is not to just keep the organization going and growing. The goal is to eventually not have to have this organization around because everyone has access to water. How can we, instead of focusing on growing the organization, focus on ending the reason that the organization exists and finding better systems and better ways to manage access to water and quality water. Thank you guys so much for being here. I'm gonna go do my chores, okay? And eat a snack. Bye, guys.